Hey everyone, I'm Jared. I'm going to be taking this cork bark elm. It's actually called a Yatsubusa elm, which just means dwarf elm. Happens to have very corky bark, which is very thick, up to an inch thick, something like that. And I'm going to be reducing it. So I want all this bottom section, which is connected to this super thick, gnarly base here. I like the branchiness down here. And then as we go up, it's got a long straight section that I'm not finding very useful in this particular design. I decided that since it's actually pretty decent as I get closer to the branching up here at the top, I'm actually going to go ahead and give it another chance and air layer that section. So I'm going to be applying an air layer using one of many techniques. This time I'm going to just use plastic bag, sphagnum moss, a little bit of rooting hormone, and wrap it up. That's a pretty common technique. I haven't used that one before. I've typically used the cut a plastic pot, put it on there, bonsai soil, moss on top. That's worked really well before, and I've gotten a couple of other elms to do really well that way. But I decided that this time I'm just going to go the normal route that most people have seen, and I know it's effective because people do that all the time with elms. Elms root super easily from layerings and even from cuttings. So I gotta get going on that. I'll try to get a little close up for you so you can see the process that I'm doing. It's gonna be up here, and let's get started on that. Well, I have some wires to tie my bag up with. It's just a sheet of plastic that is from some potting mix that I had. Seemed to be pretty good use for an extra bag. And then some cutting tools. One of them happens to be just a regular old razor, and the other one is more like a grafting tool. Not a grafting tool, but a carving tool. Just a couple of sharp blades, and then of course the sphagnum moss. So this stuff is actually dried, kind of packed in a cube sort of stuff. They claim that it's a compressed bale that expands up to 10 times its volume. So it expands when it's put in water. So that's the first step that I'm going to do here. And I got a bucket of water here. I know I'm not going to need a ton of this stuff, but I do want to have plenty for the roots to grow into. That seems about the right amount for right now, because as that expands, which I've noticed does happen as it soaks in water, it's gonna take up a lot of space in this bag that I'm gonna have there. So really, this does take a few minutes to expand like that. I'm doing this now at the beginning, that way when I'm ready for it here, after I've made my cut and gotten it ready for the point where I add the sphagnum moss, it'll be soaked and ready to go. So already looking at it without having gone too far, already a good fluffy kind of, got a lot of moisture in it already. Set that aside for now. Now I'm going to move on to actually cutting, where I'm going to be adding an air layer, and I'm going to be doing that near the bases of these branches because I want to have kind of a low growing tree thing here. I want to be able to basically see the trunks growing right out of the ground where I'm going to be having a layer on it. So I'm going to start just with one of the cutting tools, and I'm going to go, let's see, right across that. And I'm going just a little bit lower than where I want the roots to come out. This is going to be the top cut, which is going to be for the part of the tree that is actually being severed. I'm going at kind of an angle because I'm going to want to plant this at an angle. And I'm pushing in pretty deep while being careful not to slip and actually cut myself. And then I'm going about the width of the branch lower than that for the second cut. The second cut doesn't matter quite so much where it is, because that's actually going to be whittled down in the future. I'm actually going to be cutting that back quite a bit. But the top cut, I want it to be fairly well placed. Okay, so that cutting tool is just a little bit difficult. I'm going to go ahead and use this carving tool, which has a good amount of precision compared to that other one. And the bark I expect to come off pretty easily on this because there's a lot of sap flowing through here. And I can tell already that this thick corky bark is kind of shifting around a little bit in some of the parts that I'm going to be removing. Okay, so I've done that. Now I'm just going to make a slit down. This will allow me to hopefully peel this off in a fairly clean fashion. And if you've watched some of the air layering videos out there, this is pretty much what it looks like usually. Going pretty well so far. So the thing about this corky bark is that it does have a tendency to just peel off real easy. So if I'm not careful, I could peel this off well beyond where I want it to be. Alright, so the top is fairly clean, but I do have a little bit of a raggedy section here on this other side. Right about in here, I actually have a little bit that I'm not quite happy with, so I'm just going to clean that up a little bit. And what I'm going for is just a pretty flat cut. You can do this in a zigzag fashion if you feel like it, and that would be on plants that don't really seem to root very well. It gives it more surface area to have new roots come out. Since elms root so well, I'm not really worried about doing that. Alright, so what I have now is that's ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and add my bag. This is actually just a sheet of plastic. And I'm going to use my wire to attach it onto there. So I'm going to wrap from underneath that where the bark and everything is removed, and wrap from underneath that. And chances are I won't actually be using all of this plastic, but I'm going to go ahead and put it on there for now. Okay, so that's underneath it. And normally if I was having this in a more open area where people would be looking at it and everything, I might do a little bit different looking plastic that just had a nicer look. This is gonna, look like that when it's out, but it's okay because this is just in my area of in progress plants. Now I've left enough where I can go to the top, and I have a good amount of space in here where I can add a lot of moss. So the moss again is pretty wet right now, and I don't want it quite that wet. So it's not quite dripping anymore, and that should be plenty enough to put in there. And you know what? I decided I'm not even going to go with the, what's it called? Rooting hormone this time. I'm pretty sure that this is going to do just fine without it. The cuttings I did, and also the air layers I did last year, I actually didn't need the rooting hormone on that either, and they did just fine without it. So the main thing I'm trying to do is just basically contain all of that. Okay, so I'm going to be able to wrap this top, and also I have branching there at the top that's going to allow me to tie this in to keep it from falling off. So yeah, I just put that in through the crook of this branch. I'm not at all worried about this falling off. It can't really go anywhere anyways because there's another branch down here that's keeping it from falling. So there's that. Not necessarily pretty, but it is an air layer, and I imagine within 2 to 3 months this will be very full of roots. The last time I did this with just regular bonsai soil and a plastic pot, the plastic pot was completely dense, full of roots. So I imagine this will work just as well. Alright, I'm going to show a little bit of pulling some of these branches around. These lower sections that I'm going to keep are actually going to be, I'm going to do a little bit of guy wiring, and then I'll call it good. Alright, now I've done the air layering like I said. I'm going to go ahead and do the guy wiring. It's going to be pretty simple. This branch right here is the main one that I'm going to do, and this branch I want to pull back just a little bit So I'm going to find a nice place to anchor it to. I think I'm going to anchor it to a tie-in wire over here. Put a little cushioning on this raised root to keep it from getting damaged, because this thick, soft bark will get a wire scar in no time at all. So I'll just string that over there. Let's see, this one I'm also going to pull over a little bit in the same fashion. This is pretty quick, guy wiring is. It takes really no time at all to get this sort of thing in place. Don't have to wrap around the whole branch, and like I said, this is a soft bark tree, so this is also going to keep it from getting the wire scarring on the branch as well. Like I said, I have a tie-in wire here that's exposed, which I don't normally like. That wouldn't normally be something I'd have available on a tree in a nicer pot. But this is just a growing box. It's really just a bunch of 2x4s that have been cut to size, burned with a propane torch, and then given a little bit of spray paint just to make it kind of pretty. I'll show that here when I'm done. So I want it to have basically this shape that it's in right now, this branch. I want it to have kind of an upward, slightly upward growing branch there. Not straight up, not straight to the side, more of a gentle swoop as it comes up, which is what is going on. And this wire actually left it long enough so I can do the other wire from this same position. That one's done. Now I'm going to pull this one also over just a little bit. And this one's actually going to go also down just a little bit. These branches are relatively flexible, and also they do have a point where they just quit their flexing and go straight to breaking real quick. And that will not usually happen along the length of the branch. That'll happen where the branch attaches to the trunk in this case, or in the case of a branch that's come from another branch, like a twig that comes from another branch, that'll happen wherever that junction is. So I am trying to be very aware of how much pressure I'm putting on this. Alright, so both of these branches are kind of evenly placed right now. Looking at it at this point, I am liking where this further over branch is, but I want to pull this other one over a little bit more. So I'm going to have to go a little bit further back with that one somehow. That one is going to be accomplished with trimming instead. So this one's now going to grow that way. Its terminal end was about here. I am going to go ahead and do the thinning while you're here. Mainly what I'm doing is thinning out the portions that are a little bit too small and not really usable. So on this section, for example, I have a lot of branching coming from this point where I'm pointing with the scissors. And I don't really need all of that. So normally in clip and grow, I just clip where the direction is going that I want to keep it. So in this case, like that, clipped off that part, and then this part that goes back. Now that little section doesn't look like too much anymore. And I would be able to wire that pretty easily out into whatever position. Since I just trimmed this, it's going to wind up exploding with growth really quickly. A lot of what I can trim in here I can just do with my hands. Makes it super easy to clean this up. It also means that when I get to the stage of wiring, I need to be able to keep in mind that these things fall off so easily. I'm not being super precise on this because this is more just to open it up in there. Once I get it to where I'm pruning and wiring with detail wire, I'll get really deliberate on which branches that I'm trimming and then which ends I'm leaving to grow on. These scissors are great because they can cut a variety of thicknesses based on using the tip at the end for fine pruning, and then these fat parts for strength to get through some really thick pruning. So that's great and all. It just they do take a little bit of maintenance to keep them in great working order. Very much more open here. This is gonna again explode with growth, and as these position potentially this fall, I'll be able to move some of these other branches around too. Just needs a little bit of guidance, but the last thing I want to do is actually be trying to wire this when there's just tons of growth trying to spread around on this. Alright, good enough for now on that one. On this other side, there's actually two branches here right below where I did the air layer, and these will become the new apex. This lower one's going to be a branch that probably comes out a little bit, out and down like that, and in fact I am going to guy wire that down right now. This top one I'm going to allow it to grow extremely strong however it wants to, so I have a lot of really strong branches to grow out of the top of that, and that'll form this canopy which will come out from there. And it's a good couple years from having a really nice canopy there. Basically what I'm trying to do is get this spread out from the other branch that will become the new apex without having to go so far down that it looks really out of place compared to the other branches. And this looks like about the right place for it. Looking at the other side of this, let's take a look down over here. The other side of it has a whole lot of interesting trunk area here. And what I'm doing here is the roots in the back go out away from the tree, and these roots in the front are well underneath the soil surface, and they actually go down before they come back out over here. So this top is also going to go kind of out before it comes up around. There'll be a scoop pattern here that is like a crescent shape. So looking from a particular angle like this, you'll actually have the scoop coming here for the roots and a scoop coming back out for the top. And what that will really highlight is this open area here where I'm going to do a little bit more carving to this dead wood, give it some interesting hollows and just a lot of interest. Now this will be a very interesting viewing point as I turn it around in its round pot that it's going to have. And as I keep turning it, you'll be able to see the different sides with the different roots happening. You see as you turn it here, this branch just kind of juts out and extends. It'll have a nice little side canopy happening on that. I'll make sure that there's enough movement on the branches to match what I have going on down there. And in fact, this branch, I'll show you what I'm thinking of here on this branch. It goes out to the side pretty quick, but it's straight. So actually this one I'd like to give a little bit more of a bend there. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to put a stake of some kind to keep this in place here. That way when I bend it down, that will remain in position. So I'm just going to use a piece of bamboo. I have tons of this stuff around. And I'll cut a piece that's roughly that size. And keeping in mind which way I'm going to bend that, which is to this position right here. Yeah, that will work. Let's see if I have a good spot for that. Oh, that is just about the right size for that. Quite nice when that works out that way. Yeah, that's going to be nice. Okay, another guy wire happening. Okay, that was a little tricky because this one I put in a pretty significant bend right at that point where I had braced it. And it's trying to open up a little bit of a fissure there, which, like I said, doesn't normally happen very much when you're bending a branch. But since I had put so much pressure in that one particular spot, I really had to watch it. Let me show you what I'm talking about. It's right here, where you can see this little off color right here. That is where a crack was starting to develop, and it's because I had it braced here really well with a stake, and then I was pulling it from this other side with a guy wire. I was putting a lot of pressure here, And I actually had to back it off a little bit because I saw that was opening up more than I'd like it to right this second. I may tighten that guy wire down another time, but for right now I think it's about good. So that's an interesting little weird thing coming up out here. I'm going to be correcting all of this and making a nice spread here with wrapped wire, like I said, in fall. This is something that I'm really looking forward to, actually, is doing the styling on that during fall. I really want to make sure that I can get in here and do the carving work before I do that. I want to have all of the access I need to this particular chunk here without having to mess with having really fine refined branches. Same thing with the branches on this opposite side. I just want them clear for right now before I go and move over there. I'm pretty sure that when I separate this top section that I'm going to have a lot of new growth popping out all over that this type of tree typically does. It responds to pruning by growing tons more foliage to replace what was lost. So this will really grow really well, I think. That's it for this one for right now. You can probably see from that angle a little bit more where I'm going, where I have this really squat base here. It spreads quite a bit. This is a good 18-inch root spread on this tree from the widest angle. The roots go all the way out to the edge of this pot, and it's about 16 inches from one side to the other, and that's at a diagonal. So again, that's a pretty long root spread at the widest. I'm going to have to have a pretty significantly sized pot for this, which means I'll be spending a little bit of time looking for something that's really right for it. Small pots, pretty easy to find. Now, I call them small, but I guess they're not that small. This one right here, for example, lovely pot. I love this pot from Brian Soldano. And these are really common size that I could find because they ship really easily. As you can tell, this is not going to be something that I can use for any tree this size. And I really don't have anything that works really well. So that'll be a fun time looking for something with this in mind. It has a nice yellow fall color, these lovely green leaves during the growing season, and then the bark gets gray when it's in the sun, but as it gets wet, it's like this black bark. So that's actually pretty neat too in the fall when we have the yellow leaves and the black bark. And I'll have to keep in mind something that goes well with that color combination. Let's give it a spin. You can see some of the sides of it. Definitely really good roots on that side over there. And as you come around here, it's got really interesting deadwood chunk that's going to get carved. Nice and wide from certain sides. Really gnarly roots from other sides. And then from other sides, you really get a nice, interesting look at the what will become the apex. Fun tree. Glad I found it. It was actually discounted quite steeply from the other ones that looked more healthy because this top had died. It was a big, tall tree. Top died, grew a new branch to replace it, but no one seemed to want to buy it because that top wasn't there anymore. And this is actually a really, really cool tree to use all of this interesting lower section. I'm excited about it, and I'm glad that I found it. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you for watching.